Economist here. Give me 1 second to make sure everything is going right here. All right. Thank you for joining in on today's live stream. We're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve not cutting interest rates and really not having any plan of cutting interest rates going into the future. Really, it was never a plan to bring inflation down to a 2% target. So as people are assuming that the Federal Reserve is attempting to try and get inflation down to a 2% target in order to bring interest rates down to a more accommodating position, all this stuff is like artistic fantasy land that most people are living in. And it's just really odd to me that so many people can have the strategy of the Federal Reserve so misunderstood, misguided, or just literally not even known about. And it's not like it's hidden. I mean, the Federal Reserve has come out quite a few times talking about their strategy. Now, they don't make it necessarily public knowledge every single time they come out and do a press conference or do an interview with the mainstream media, but it's not like they've kept it hidden from the people about what it is that they plan on doing with their monetary policy in accordance to the Fed funds rate being in accommodating or restricting positions in accordance to where it is that the inflation and expectations are. I know this is really confusing, but ultimately many people are looking out there saying, well, the jobs number have come down, inflation has come down, and if interest rates had come down, everybody would be singing this really happy song that everything is wonderful and hunky-dory out there. I mean, I just don't get it. Now, I find articles like the one that I left down in the description, I find these particular articles to be very telling of how it is that a lot of people are viewing the current situation within the economy. Now, this article, this is coming out of CNBC, and it's titled, "Tariffs Lead Us Down a Different Timeline for Interest Rates." So ultimately, the focus on this now is like, oh, this brand new issue that has taken place over these last few months since President Trump has been elected. These issues that are now here has led us down a different timeline. Listen to what this says. This is so, like, I don't know, even know, like, this is like pure imagination taking place right here. This is from the article. This is what it says. It's the what could have beens that hurt the most. What could have been, right? This is what hurts the most. Like a childhood sweetheart who moved to a different country. A different country. The early opportunity to invest in a company designing graphics chips for games. The low interest rate, if not for tariffs. On Tuesday, U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell confirmed that tariffs, and specifically their unexpectedly large, quote, size, are the chief reasons the central bank hasn't moved rates in this year since last cutting them in December. Now, what in the imagination of a teenage girl comes up with this sort of scenario? Like a childhood sweetheart who moved to a different country. Aw. What in the world is this? This is CNBC? This is the information? Like a childhood sweetheart who moved to a different country. The early opportunity to invest in a company designed graphic chips for games. This is what blows people out of the water when it comes to understanding the economy. This literally sends them into the unknown areas of misunderstandings, of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's literally articles like this that are driving people into that. Goes on to say, imagine what would have been living in a world where the Fed funds rate is at a range of 4% to 4.25. If inflation was staying obedient below the Fed's 2% goal. Whoa. Obedient below the 2% goal? Well, if 2% is the goal, being below it would no longer be achieving the goal, now would it? obediently below the 2% goal? Does this person understand that just a few years ago, the Federal Reserve was desperate to try and find a 2% inflation target? Not to try and get it down to 2%, to try and get it to 2%, to try and get it up to that 2% goal. This person right here is believing that being obediently below 2% is somehow a wonderful, magical thing for the Federal Reserve. Like, they have no clue about the Federal Reserve's monetary policy if they believe that inflation being below 2% would be obedient. They have no clue about what the Federal Reserve was facing just a few years ago. This is completely lost information. Somebody who is reading this going, oh my gosh, what is going on with the Federal Reserve, would be completely misguided. Right? The Federal Reserve was never trying to get to a 2% goal. Not since the great financial crisis, not since the great pandemic. The great financial crisis proved it to them that all the money printer would never get them to an inflationary scenario of 2%. They needed something far bigger than that. This is coming directly from the Federal Reserve. This is the full report to Congress, February 7th of 2025. Okay? February 7th of 2025. This is what the Federal Reserve was telling Congress. The inflation rate over the long run is primarily determined by the monetary policy, and hence the committee has the ability to specify long-run goal for inflation. This isn't Congress. This isn't some elected official, Trump, president, somebody like that saying, hey, we need to get to a 2% goal. It's the committee, and they determine what that goal is. Not us, not Trump, nobody. But the FOMC themselves. They determine what the goal is. The committee reaffirms its judgment that inflation at a rate of 2% as measured by the annual change in price index for personal consumption expenditures is most consistent over a longer run with the Federal Reserve's statutory mandate. The Federal Reserve is mandated to do two things. Low inflation with stable prices. Right? That's the mandate. Low inflation with stable prices. There is no definition of what that means. And full employment. That's the mandate. Right? Nothing else. Not housing market, not stock market, not any of the other stuff that people want to lead you to believe. Not saying that those people don't take advantage of it. I'm not saying that. Right? What I am saying is that that's not part of their mandate to keep the stock market elevated. People who internalize information with the idea that the Federal Reserve is attempting to keep the market elevated, keep the real estate market elevated, to do it for political reasons is misguided. That is not what they are attempting to do. Goes on to say here, the committee judges that long-term inflation expectations that are anchored at 2% foster price stability and moderate long-term interest rates, and hence the committee's ability to promote maximum employment in the face of significant economic disturbances. What was their goal? The committee judges that long-term inflation expectations that are well anchored at 2%. That's not inflation, that's inflation expectations. Those are two different things. Okay. In order to anchor long-term inflation expectations at this level, the committee seeks to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time. So therefore judges that following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, like since the great financial crisis leading all the way up to the pandemic, the Federal Reserve and the inflationary scenario have been falling consistently under 2%, right? So this is exactly the time that they are describing, right? Following periods when inflation has been running persistently below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. This is what the Federal Reserve was telling Congress just in February. that they were seeking to achieve inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. So now when I go back to this article, right, that says the what could have beens, right? If the Federal Reserve had lowered interest rates, if they were trying to, what did it say here? Trying to get inflation staying obedient below the Fed's 2% target. Oh, what would it could have been, right? This is artistic fantasies. This is what causes people to misunderstand the current environment and misunderstand how it is that they position themselves. They're sitting around giving energy and thought to the idea of what could have been. Oh, what if they had dropped it? Inflation would be running consistently below 2%. Think about how awesome it would be. Think about all the things that a hypothetical situation that doesn't mean anything to the current situation would be like. Tell me they are not trying to throw you off the track. If this is what they are feeding you information that purposefully, literally directs you off the track, says, think about the way it could have possibly have been. Not the way it is. Don't think about the way it is. Think about the way it could be or could have been. Oh, that childhood sweetheart that moved to another country. This is a similar situation. What in the world? Like, this is not the way that you make good decisions for yourself, is by reading this kind of garbage. When I was reading through this, I thought, man, there's got to be a nugget of information in here. And I'm thinking, no. What this does is purposefully causes people to misunderstand what it is that the Federal Reserve is truly attempting to do. If they are trying to get inflation moderately above 2% for some time, do you think that they are achieving their goal today? Like, people who say, oh man, they're stuck, they can't get it, they can't quite get down to their goal. And I'm thinking, oh, their goal is moderately above 2%. How is it they are not achieving their goal? I don't understand. Right? People who think that they're trying to get it down to a 2% target and have a difficult time achieving it, well, I would understand why you think that they can't get to their goal. Because you don't understand what the real goal was. And since the real goal was to be moderately above 2% for some time, with no mathematical formula for figuring that out, you don't believe me? Here, hold on. All right? Let me prove this one to you too. This is coming from Jerome Powell, August 27th of 2020. And this is what he has to say. All right? He said this: we have made important changes with regard to our price stability of our mandate. Oh, you guys changed your mandate? The price stability, you made changes back in 2020. Is anybody aware of that? Other than maybe the uneducated economist who's constantly coming out here talking about this change that they had made a few years ago that nobody recognized? I mean, here he is in a speech telling you straight up that they had changed the way that they were conducting themselves. Nobody knows it. I don't know why they don't know it, other than they choose not to hear it, or because it's probably because it's not reiterated to them. This is what it has to say. Our long-run goal continues to be inflation rate of 2%. That's the long-run goal. Our statement emphasizes that our actions to achieve both sides of our dual mandate will be most effective if the long-run inflation expectations remain well anchored at 2%. The long-run inflation, what? Expectations at 2%. Oh, well, you definitely got that. People believe that you're trying to get to a 2% target. I mean, that's long-run inflation expectations well anchored at 2%. I can agree with that. However, if inflation runs below 2% following economic downturns but never moves above 2% even when the economy is strong, then over time inflation will average less than 2%. Households and businesses will come to expect this result, meaning that inflation expectations would tend to move below our inflation goal and pull realized inflation down. This idea that the CNBC article is taking in this artistic fantasy that the Federal Reserve was trying to bring inflation down to 2% or less than that is complete BS. They were not. Never in their intentions for the last 5 years had they had this idea of bringing inflation down to 2%. It was never part of their plan. To prevent this outcome, this problem of facing below inflation target, to prevent this outcome and adverse dynamics that could ensue, our new statement indicates that we will seek to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, and therefore following periods when inflation has been running below 2%, appropriate monetary policy will likely aim to achieve inflation moderately above 2% for some time. Wow. Do you think that's maybe the same thing that was just stated just a few months ago to Congress? I mean, for the last 5 years, the Federal Reserve had a monetary policy plan to have inflation above 2% for some time, reiterated just a few months ago to Congress. Do you not think that maybe that's still part of the plan since they haven't changed it? They haven't changed that statement. They haven't said anything differently about their strategies other than they were going to be moderately above 2% for some time. Here we are. This is exactly the way the Federal Reserve was asking it to be, looking for it to be, strategizing to be, exactly like this, moderately above 2% for some time. This is where it gets really fun. In seeking to achieve inflation that averages 2% over time, we are not tying ourselves to a particular mathematical formula that defines the average. Well, isn't that convenient? They are not tying themselves to a particular mathematical formula that defines the average. There's no mathematical formula for this. People say, oh man, the Fed's doing this and they're all trying, and let me show you the numbers here. Well, they don't have a mathematical formula. I don't know why you're trying to come up with one. People are like, well, what is it? I want to know. I need to know, exactly what it is. They do not have a mathematical formula for figuring this out. I don't know how it is that you're going to try and come up with one if they don't have one. Thus, our approach could be viewed as a flexible form of average inflation targeting. Our decision about appropriate monetary policy will continue to reflect a broad array of considerations and will not be dictated by any formula. So all these people out there who think that they know what the Federal Reserve is trying to do, they have this idea of inflation, average inflation, whatever. They do not. They have no clue. They come up with these ideas of what average inflation is. The Federal Reserve doesn't have it. They don't have a mathematical formula for it. So as these other people are saying, well, this is what it is, I have no idea what it is that they are talking about because they do not have a mathematical formula for figuring this out. Just knowing that it's a flexible average inflation targeting in which that they are seeking to have inflation moderately above 2% for some time to anchor the long-term inflation expectations at 2%. This is their goal. They are achieving it. As people look to the idea that lowering interest rates is going to somehow stimulate the economy, those people fail to understand that there is a neutral interest rate. That neutral interest rate is when the Federal Reserve and the Fed funds rate is neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. The higher the inflation expectations, the higher the neutral interest rate goes. The more that neutral interest rate moves closer to the Fed funds rate, the less resisted the economy becomes. As we look out there and see that the stock market is reaching all-time highs, why it is that the real estate market hasn't crashed like all the crash bros thought it was going to, why it is we seem to have this resilient economy, why it is that there's still jobs numbers that seem to be indication of a strong labor force, even though it does show signs of weakening. We are doing quite well when it comes to the Federal Reserve and where it is that they have positioned themselves to be within this economy. This is what they were asking for. This is what they were looking for. This is what they strategized on. And everybody seems to think that they made a mistake, that they are failing, that they don't know what they are doing. And by taking on that sort of belief that 99% of the people have done, they literally gave the power to the Federal Reserve that they needed. It was their success. So as the pain and suffering that most people will feel from the inflationary scenario gets blamed on the Federal Reserve, they gain more of their power back from that. It's not like they didn't know that they were going to do this to you. He admits it right here in this speech. You know that? He says, let me get it back up here. He says it. The persistent undershoot of inflation from 2% long-run objective is a cause for concern. This is the Federal Reserve saying this. They were scared of an inflation that was persistently under 2%. The persistent undershoot of inflation from our 2% long-run objective is a cause for concern. Many find it counterintuitive that the Fed would want to push up inflation. Hell, some of us found it almost impossible that you could do it. I mean, here it is. You just got off a quantitative easing from the great financial crisis and expanding the balance sheet of $850 billion to over $4.5 trillion, failing to produce an inflationary scenario that you were looking for, causing concern. And many find it counterintuitive that you would want to push up inflation. Some of us found it almost impossible for you to push up inflation, seeing as how you couldn't do it with the expansion of the balance sheet of over 4 times. How many people took on the consideration that there was going to be a hyperinflation scenario from quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4? I did. I came out thinking for sure that the dollar was going to cease to exist from a hyperinflationary scenario that was caused by the great financial crisis and the quantitative easing of 1, 2, 3, and 4. I dumped every dime I had into silver, believing that the dollar was about ready to crash. What ended up happening? The Fed failed to produce the inflationary scenario that they were looking for from it. I dumped every dime I had into silver thinking I was protecting myself, and I completely went underwater on that. I didn't lose money because I didn't sell, but I was so frustrated. Here it was that I was putting all my money into silver thinking I was protecting myself from a failing dollar, and watched silver go from 25 to 35 all the way up to almost $50 an ounce just to crash back down into the teens. I was so disappointed. I couldn't figure out why it was that I was misunderstanding the economy so much that happened to me. It happened during a time in which that I could afford it the least. I quickly went into depression. I went into a bad state in my life. I had very little money, very little ambition, very little things going on in my life, and I blamed it all on my misunderstanding of what was taking place. I thought for sure that we were going to have a hyperinflation scenario and silver was going to make me rich. Man, was I wrong. So I started studying the Federal Reserve and monetary policy to get a better understanding of what it is that's taking place, because that hyperinflation scenario I should have been able to protect myself from it, that it never occurred. Why? It's because inflation was desperately being seeked out by the Federal Reserve and they couldn't get it. They were trying to push hyperinflation expectations into the people to elevate the actual inflation. It was failing them. It was failing them miserably. He goes on to say, after all, a low and stable inflation is essential for a well-functioning economy. And this is Jerome Powell, says, and we are certainly mindful that higher prices for essential items such as food, gasoline, and shelter add to the burdens faced by many families, especially those struggling with lost jobs and incomes. Those at the lower end, those who can afford it the least, those are the people who are going to suffer the most in an inflationary scenario. They're well aware of it. You think rich people suffer in an inflationary scenario? Oh, they have to cut back on their expenses? Oh, boo-hoo. Try cutting out your necessities. That's pain. For the rich, it's irritating. It's frustrating. It's annoying. For the poor, it's absolute pain. It's a painful experience. He goes on to say this. However, because they know, the Fed knows, right? Rich people, they're going to be annoyed, irritated, a bit frustrated. The poor people, they will experience pain and suffering, and they know it. All right? However, there's a problem. If inflation that is persistently too low can pose a serious risk to the economy. You pose a serious risk to the top 20%, you mean, right? I mean, that's ultimately what he's saying, because the economy is a consumption-based economy. And since most of the people are not consuming like the top 20% are, the top 20% are the people who are important. That's what he is saying. However, inflation that is persistently too low can pose a serious risk to the 20% of the people out there. Can't have that. So, sorry, poor people. You're going to have to suffer a little bit with the pain and misery of higher inflation because, it's a really uncomfortable, frustrating thing for the top 20% to experience this. So Since you're really not important and the top 20% are, you're going to have to experience pain and suffering and misery because, inflation that is persistently too low can pose a serious risk to the top 20%. Uh-oh. Right? Inflation that runs below its desired level can lead to an unwelcome fall in long-term inflation expectations, which in turn can pull actual inflation even lower, resulting in the adverse cycle of ever lower inflation and inflation expectations. This is the Federal Reserve's policy plan 5 years ago that we are now experiencing today. Moderately above 2% for some time, never attempting to get it down to a 2% target, and that was reiterated just a few months ago to Congress in the congressional report. How many people know that? Very few. Here on the Uneducated Economist, we talk about it every single day. In fact, it's talked about so much here on this channel that people are getting bored with it. I am not going to let it go. If I let this go, nobody's going to see it. Nobody's going to know it. And if I don't keep putting these videos out, then nobody's going to be able to go back and reference it and say, man, he actually called this right. Yeah. Nobody sees it. I don't get it why. Right? Unless it's purposefully pushed out there to misguide the people, and I believe that is the case. I think articles like the one that I am leaving down in the description is absolutely throwing people completely off the trail. They will never see it if they take in consideration like this. If they did not know ahead of time what the Federal Reserve's true monetary policy strategy is, and they read an article like this, they may never ever get it. This literally may taint their understanding that they would literally need to spend absolute, intense teachings in order to undo what it is that they have been misguided into in order to understand it for the reality of it is. Their subconscious has now picked up the wrong information and is now delivering them an opportunity that does not exist. They look at this article saying, how do I position myself on accordance of this? This information is completely hypothetical BS. It's nothing close to reality. All right, let's go check out this $5 super chat from Jay. Thank you so much for the $5. They don't have any idea what's going on. They do. They lost the banks in 2002. They lost market in 2008. And now we are past all the red lines. Jay, I'm sorry, bro. I really appreciate the $5 and the super chat. And for you to make the comment, I so appreciate it here on the channel, but you're wrong. That sort of mindset is what's giving the Federal Reserve the power that they need in order to continue to conduct themselves. If they had lost what they were doing in 2002, here we are, it's 23 years later. They're still going. They didn't lose it. Your understanding of what it is that they are doing has been misguided. That's the problem that we are seeing nowadays, is that that's 99% of the people. And again, man, I appreciate everything that, everybody who comes to the channel, everybody who's, supports the channel and stuff like that. I thank you, man. I cannot thank you guys enough. But literally every time we think that the Federal Reserve is lost control of inflation, lost control of the dollar, lost control of everything that's going on out there, all the horrible evilness that's going on, that's what's giving the Federal Reserve the power that they need. They want you to have an elevated inflation expectation. And if it's a hyperinflation expectation that you have, perfect. That is what they were looking for. That's what they want you to have. You're leading to their success, man. And I understand, our position in it looks much differently. We look at it going, no, this is destroying us. This is horrible. This is evil. This is bad. This is the worst thing in the entire world. And I totally agree with it. That is what's giving the Federal Reserve the power that they need. They need you to have that sort of feeling and understanding. And if they can keep pushing that out there, they're going to get success from it. All right, Dotmaster 5, strippers and coffee Thursday. I mean, we got the strippers. I guess it's open tonight. I mean, yeah, sounds good. Yeah. I don't know. Strippers are like, I don't get into the whole stripper thing. Like, I mean, that's exciting for about 5 minutes. And then, like, it's just like, this is it. This is as far as it goes. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go shoot a game pool or something, unless there's something else happening here. This is it. I'm out, man. I'm bored. All right. We all get programmed in propaganda. All we can do is love people. Kirk, you're absolutely right, man. Strippers are some of my favorite people. Yeah. Okay. If you have enough money, it can go further. All right. In relation to what you said about their view with your information. Oh. Yeah. Strippers and coffee. Yeah, I get what you're saying. There is a lot that can be said about the economy by looking at, those two industries, the coffee industry and the stripper industry. Like, I think if the whole exotic dancer industry, whatever, like if they were to have real good macroeconomic understanding, like I think that they would be on the very cutting edge of understanding what has taken place within the economy, the shifts within the economy. I think that they would be in an industry that would be very telling, like could tell right away when the shift is happening. Yeah. But most people they don't know, right? Like they just don't get it. And even the idea, like, I don't know how many people took on an idea that the inflation was going to be running rampant and destroy the dollar and destroy America and destroy the people and, everything. Like, I mean, even going to the rebel capitalists, like all the speakers up there were talking like that and all this other stuff. And I'm like, man, why is it that I'm the only one who is looking at this saying, man, every time somebody says this, they are giving the Federal Reserve the power that they need? Like, I feel like I'm the only one who was looking at it in that way. Every time I looked around saying, man, don't blame the money printer, blame the supply chain breakdown. Because if you blame the money printer, that's going to give the Federal Reserve the power that they need. Don't give them any power. Don't do that. Look at the supply chain breakdown as the indicator of the inflationary scenario, because that's going to explain why the inflation has come down. I showed it in lumber. I called it out in lumber so accurately. It was very difficult to see it in other things. Lumber is almost 100% domestically supplied, right? There is 20% of the consumption comes from foreign imports, and a good chunk of that comes from Canada. But the United States produces its own lumber. We have a well-established, well-functioning, very, I don't know how to put it, like very abundant lumber production capabilities here. So when the lumber prices shot up to their all-time highs and people were blaming the money printer, I said it then. I was like, this is a supply chain breakdown that I was reporting on in 2019. I mean, every other video I was doing, I probably did 100 videos in 2019 talking about mill curtailments, shutdowns, inventory depletions, complete chaos within the lumber industry. 2020 hit, COVID shut down the lumber mills, even more lumber depletion, even more curtailments. Prices shot through the roof. When I saw that the lumber production was ramping up, I said, just give it some time and you're going to find these lumber prices coming back down to normal and nobody's going to be able to explain it. When I made that video, people said, dude, you have no idea about the Federal Reserve and how money works. And I said, okay, well, you're not going to be able to explain how come lumber is back down to its normal price when it comes back down. And sure enough, it did. Now, understanding that it's a domestically made material. Most things that are in production come from foreign producers. Even the components, even if it's assembled here in the United States, parts and elements come from foreign production. Knowing that would be the case, not everything was going to find its way back down in the same dramatic fashion that lumber did. I mean, there's plenty of stuff out there. People talk about all these ultra high food prices, and every time I go to the grocery store, my wife is able to find incredible sales. Here it is. Like, I mean, we save hundreds of dollars every single week when we go out grocery shopping. She is absolutely vigilant. She is one of the best shoppers I have ever seen. She makes a game out of it. She just doesn't just go down and buy random food. She makes sure that what she is purchasing is the absolute best for her dollar. She's good at it. Huh? Knowing that it's possible, knowing that you have to work for it, knowing that it's available out there gives you a much different idea of what it is that's happening. Most people look at it and say, hey man, inflation is going to destroy us. Let me prove it to you. And then they go out and they do things to their life that proves how it is that inflation is going to destroy them. And then they come back and say, see, told you so. Do you realize that was the ego? Your ego is destroying you. That's what's happening. Every time you blame the Federal Reserve, it's your ego trying to prove yourself right. Very few people want to take the internal problem, take it internally and say, this is me. This is my reflection that I'm getting out there from my understanding and my beliefs and my strategies. This is the reflection I get. And if you're out there saying, look at all these horrible things that are happening, you're absolutely right. That is your reality. Just keep listing them off, because I guarantee you that's exactly what you're going to see from it. I know, I did that. I used to be a conspiratorial New World Order takeover, better protect yourself from the inevitable collapse kind of guy, and I guarantee you I had a horrible existence because of it. The day I said that ain't it no more, and I'm going to take control of this understanding and what it is that's actually happening out there, and when I figured out and sat around and read enough on money to know what the Federal Reserve strategy is, I looked out there and thought, holy crap, nobody gets this. 99% of the people are going to feed the Federal Reserve the power that they need, and that's exactly what ended up happening. All right, moving on. What time is it? Okay, guys, I'm just going to call it quits here. I'm going to read a couple more comments and then we got to end the stream. It's not a recession. The wealth gap is just widening and you're feeling that more. I agree, right? I totally agree. The inequality is getting worse, right? The Cantillon effect is kicking in big time. More billionaires and millionaires every single month, not a recession. Brother Simon, do we burn our way out of this deficit with hyper productivity, or do we embrace austerity and rapidly decline for a short term to get back to normal? DJ, we're never going back to normal. All the stuff that you're trying to imagine and come up with to try and create a better environment is going to be lost energy. Don't do it. Okay? It's better to understand why this is taking place and know that it's a cycle, and this cycle cannot be reversed. We were an industrious people. Think about it. If you were an industrious people who do production and savings for a strong economy, the people matter, right? The worker matters. But if you moved out of that economy and you moved into a debtor consumer-based economy, the only people who matter are the consumers, and that's the top 20%. We're done. As working class people, every day, we are screwed. There is no way that this economy is coming back to support us. If you do not take your position in life right now and say, I have to move myself way beyond just this daily average 9-to-5 job and start trying to start businesses, trying to figure out how to do affiliate sales, trying to go out there and do something beyond our regular day job, you are going to get left behind. This wedge is going to get driven deeper, and the average everyday working class job will get worse and worse to survive on. That's the problem that you face. Don't try fixing it, understand the problem, and then position yourself accordingly for it. I know it's going to be a lot of work, and I know you don't want to go through it. I didn't want to go through it. I have no other choice. I wish it could be different. I do. I wish my 9-to-5 job was enough. Right? I wish it was enough. I would love to just do YouTube videos for nothing more than fun, which I try to do for fun. Right? I try to keep it something that I enjoy doing, regardless of the money that comes from it. If I wasn't doing YouTube, I can't make it. I can't make it without YouTube. My day job is not enough, and there's nothing I can do to change that. There's nothing I can do to come up with an idea that everybody is going to get on board with that says, hey man, we can do this together. Let's rise together and bring the strength back to the working class person again. Let's do it together. We can do this together. We will be left behind. The top will walk all over us. Say, yeah, you go for it, guys. You try real hard, stick to itness. Meanwhile, they're just going to keep driving the wedge, and we're going to be wondering what happened. It's sad, I know. I'm sorry. I would love to give you guys a better answer, to say this is how we can all work together to make it better for everybody. I don't know how that is. The only thing I can offer you up is what I see happening today, how these economic forces are playing out, and what it is that you can do about it for your own personal self, because I just don't know what it is that we can do collectively. I mean, you can do revolution kind of stuff, I mean, I know how to shoot guns. Yay, doesn't that sound like fun? All right. Jay, you misunderstood me. The Federal Reserve should not exist. I agree, Jay. Like, I'm down for ending the Federal Reserve. Here's the problem with it is I think I can handle myself without a Federal Reserve, without a central banking system, without the fiat currency, without all that stuff. Go back to gold, silver, or even for a lesser extent, Bitcoin. I understand how I can position myself for that. Most people don't realize that we are a debtor consumer-based economy with deficit trade, meaning that we would import stuff and export gold, and most of the people would fall into pain and misery almost instantaneously if we were to get rid of the central banking system, right? Now, again, I personally think I would do quite well. And I'm down for it. Let's do it, man. I mean, I'm down for it. Let's make it happen. Let's end the Federal Reserve, and let's see if my strategies will work out really well. That's going to work out okay for me, but 99% of the people out there will find themselves in poverty and misery, and then you're going to be like, oh man, now what do we do with these people? All right? Because the government won't be able to help. Not if you don't have a central banking system in which that they can just go into as much debt issuance as they want. If you don't have that available to them, the government is just going to be like, just can't do it. So I'm down for it. I want to, right? But I don't want to see all those people suffering. So I'm okay with the way things are, because I understand the situation that's at hand, and I also understand that I'm going to have to work very hard to be in this, to work in this environment. I don't like it, but it's whatever. It is what it is. And then since I understand it, and most people are trying to figure out a way to not have to work hard in this system, but to try and figure out how they can vote for somebody who's going to make their life easier, there's really not a whole lot of competition out there. So, okay, like that's what I'm discovering. If people are like, what do we do? And I'm thinking, well, understand the situation, understand where your competition is, and be better than your competition. And I appreciate it, Jay. I really do. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to be disagreeing or something of that nature whatsoever. Like, I'm down for ending the Federal Reserve. I'm down to go on a gold standard, even cryptocurrencies, whatever it is. Like, to me, like at this point, it's not up to me to decide what it should be. Just tell me what it is that we're going to do. I mean, if we're going to continue on with this fiat currency, consumer-based, debtor-based, driving the wedge, making inequality even worse and all that other stuff, so be it. Whatever, right? I can't stop it from happening. I wish I could. I tried to put myself in a position in which that I was outside of the system. Gold, silver, no cell phone, no bank accounts, none of that stuff. Screw them people, all that other stuff. You know how depressing of a life that was? Do you know how few opportunities, how horrible of an existence I was in? Like, maybe somebody else could really enjoy that sort of life. Maybe they're telling themselves, self-justifying that existence as a proper way of being. I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And I am absolutely loving every minute of this. Right? I don't agree with the stuff that's out there, but since I kind of recognize what it is that's happening out there, I position myself accordingly for it. I don't feel the pain and suffering. I don't feel the fear. There's no fear. All righty, guys, I got to go to work. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.